Right now, Conor McGregor is aggressively doing heavy-seated leg extensions on a knee that, honestly, structurally speaking, exploded less than a month ago.
Which is just wild to even think about.
Yeah, it's crazy. And at this exact same moment, a former UFC title challenger is facing 3 felonies. Not because he's, a hardened criminal, but because
Yeah.
the very psychological armor that made him a world champion is just utterly destroying him outside the cage.
Right, the system is just completely breaking down.
Exactly. We are witnessing the human body and the human mind basically snapping under the weight of modern combat sports.
Absolutely.
From the dojo to the octagon, this is Budocast, your source for the latest in martial arts news, culture, and competition. From breaking fight results to evolving techniques, we cover it all. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So today, we are asking one overarching question for this deep dive, one that is really defining the current era of martial arts. Where exactly does the fragile human body fit into the modern billion-dollar algorithm of combat?
Yeah, it's a massive question.
I want you, the listener, to just imagine standing at the crossroads of ancient martial arts discipline and modern TikTok spectacle. Because that is exactly where today's sources are taking us. We are looking at an industry that is rapidly engineering new ways to extract virality, legacy, and profit from physical violence.
It's basically a collision.
Right, yeah.
Collision between ancient disciplines and the relentless churn of the modern attention economy.
Right, and the friction between those two worlds is creating a landscape that is fundamentally altering how fighters train, how they fight, and honestly, how they survive.
That collision is the defining characteristic of this decade in sports. I mean, you have biological organisms, human beings with finite connective tissue, finite neurological bandwidth, and very real psychological limits. And they're being fed into a machine that demands infinite algorithmic engagement.
Content.
Exactly. The human body just wasn't designed to be a perpetual content engine.
Yeah.
But when you look at how the architecture of the fight game is shifting, from the corporate boardrooms to the actual physical geometry of the rings they fight in, well, the goal is clearly to optimize for maximum spectacle.
Regardless of the physiological costs.
Yeah, the cost is completely secondary.
So let's start with the architecture being built in those corporate boardrooms, because that is where the blueprint for this new algorithm is really being drawn.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got the massive merger just finalized between the Professional Fighters League, the PFL, and Most Valuable Promotions, MVP.
Right, Jake Paul and Nikisa Bedarian.
Yeah, they're spearheading this. And Nikisa Bedarian isn't just, some guy with a spreadsheet. He is the former chief financial officer of the UFC.
A major player.
He was instrumental in the UFC's $4 billion sale to WME-IMG back in 2016. So you pair the guy who literally wrote the financial playbook for modern MMA monopolies with Jake Paul.
And Jake Paul basically wrote the playbook for the digital attention economy.
Exactly. What's your take on how this changes things?
What's fascinating here is how it represents a total paradigm shift in how fights are made. I mean, the traditional model of combat sports was meritocratic matchmaking.
Right. You build contenders up a ladder.
Exactly. The number 2 guy fights the number 1 guy, and the winner gets the champion.
Simple enough.
But what Bedarian and Paul are engineering with the PFL merger is what we can call attention economy matchmaking.
Oh, I like that term.
Yeah, because the algorithm doesn't care about a fighter's ranking. It cares about their engagement metrics, their cross-platform reach, and their ability to trigger a cultural moment.
Which is exactly what we saw when they sat cage side at the PFL New York event at the UBS Arena. They weren't just scouting talent, were they?
No, not at all. They were scouting scalable assets.
But here is the tension in that strategy. You can build all the hype in the world on social media, but eventually the cage door locks.
The fight actually has to happen.
Right. And the PFL New York event proved that you still need absolute terrifying martial arts proficiency to anchor the spectacle.
Oh, absolutely.
Usman Nurmagomedov defending his lightweight title against Archie Colgan was a perfect example. Colgan came in at 13-1, a highly credentialed wrestler, and Usman completely dismantled him in the first round.
It was clinical. Let's actually break down the mechanism of that knockout, because it perfectly illustrates the terror of the Dagestani striking meta.
Yeah, please do.
Usman didn't just throw a lucky head kick. He exploited Colgan's neurological wiring.
How so?
Well, when you fight a Nurmagomedov, your entire central nervous system is hyper-fixated on the threat of the takedown. Every time Usman twitches his hips, Colgan's hands instinctively drop to dig underhooks or defend his legs.
He's basically terrified of going to the ground.
Right. So Usman spent the first 2 minutes conditioning that exact response with level changes. Then he feints the level change, freezing Colgan's defensive posture, and brings the kick seamlessly over the top. The left hook and the ground and pound that followed were academic. Usman completely hijacked Colgan's defensive reflexes.
It's just a masterclass in exploiting human reaction times. And we saw a similar level of pure dominance in the co-main event with Dakota Decheva.
It was incredible.
She stepped into the cage against Denise Kielholtz after more than a year away and put on an absolute striking clinic, moving her record to 16-0.
She didn't look like an algorithmic asset, you know?
Yeah.
She looked like a generational martial artist.
Exactly. So the PFL has this fascinating duality right now. You've got the viral marketing of Jake Paul layered right over the absolute technical mastery of fighters like Decheva and Usman.
And they really need that duality to survive, because if it's all spectacle and no substance, the hardcore fan base abandons ship.
Right.
But if it's all substance and no spectacle, you just don't generate the revenue required to sustain a global promotion.
It's a tough balancing act. But the PFL isn't the only entity trying to hack this equation, right? The bare-knuckle scene is taking the algorithmic optimization of violence to a terrifying, literal extreme. Well, they absolutely are.
This brings us to bare-knuckle boxing, BKB, and their recent merger with BYB Extreme. They are now claiming to have surpassed BKFC as the largest professional bare-knuckle promotion in the world.
Which is a massive claim.
It's huge. And their broadcast reach is undeniable. Vice's TV, TalkSport, Telemundo. They even claim to be the most viewed live sports property on TikTok.
Their digital footprint is insane.
But they didn't achieve that just by, taking the gloves off. They actually manipulated the physics of the fighting environment.
Yeah.
They patented the Trigon ring.
Yes. This is perhaps the most audacious biomechanical experiment in modern combat sports. The Trigon ring is literally an equilateral triangle. 3 sides, 3 corners.
Okay, let's unpack this. A triangle ring. On paper, it sounds like a gimmick you'd see in a 1990s Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
It really does.
Doesn't taking away the angles just result in fighters instantly clashing into a messy clinch? We see this in bare knuckle all the time. When you remove space, it often devolves into a stalling hugging match.
Right, which isn't great for views. Exactly. So how does a stalling clinch equate to TikTok virality? Is this about evolving martial arts technique or just engineering faster knockouts to feed the algorithm?
It's a very valid question, but we have to look at the geometry of the clinch itself.
Okay, break it down.
In a traditional boxing ring, the squared circle, the corners are 90 degrees. In the UFC's octagon, the interior angles are 135 degrees. Those obtuse angles provide space.
Right, breathing room.
Exactly. When an outboxer gets pressured, they can use lateral movement to slide along the ropes, pivot, and escape. If they do get cornered, a 90-degree corner gives them enough physical space to tie up their opponent.
They can establish underhooks and stall for a referee break.
Precisely. But in an equilateral triangle, the corners are 60 degrees.
So the corner is literally sharper and tighter.
Dramatically so. The mathematical reduction in square footage is significant, but it's the acuteness of those 60-degree corners that changes everything.
How does that affect the fighters in the moment?
You physically cannot stall in a 60-degree corner because there simply isn't enough spatial volume to properly frame your hips and establish a defensive clinch.
Wow, okay.
If you take a step backward in a Trigon ring, you are instantly funneling yourself into a physical trap where your opponent's forward pressure compresses you. It heavily penalizes defensive, elusive footwork.
Like Floyd Mayweather, right.
Exactly. Think about a defensive master like Mayweather. His entire shoulder roll, rope-a-dope ecosystem relies on the spatial freedom of a traditional ring. In a triangle, that ecosystem just collapses.
So it's literally an environment engineered to eliminate defensive fighting. It forces a high-speed car crash right in the center of the ring.
That's exactly the point.
BKB has an event coming up on August 29th in Miami, headlined by Yuriorkis Gamboa. And Gamboa is a former WBA and IBF boxing champion.
He's a legend.
Right. But he has spent decades mastering the geometry of a square. Now he has to relearn his entire spatial awareness for a triangle at the tail end of his career.
Right.
It feels like putting a thoroughbred racehorse on a motocross track.
It is an environment optimized for the attention economy. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
It guarantees violent collisions because it mathematically eliminates the possibility of a slow-paced, tactical outside fight.
Which is perfect for social media.
Right. It's the physical manifestation of the TikTok scroll continuous high-intensity stimulation, with absolutely no lulls in the action.
Which is exactly the kind of stimulation Jake Paul is trying to engineer outside the cage. I mean, if BKB is manipulating geometry, Jake Paul is basically manipulating cultural tribalism.
He's a master at it.
He just issued a $1 million challenge to any NFL player who can outbox him better than he can run football routes against them.
Yeah, that made huge waves.
He claimed no NFL player could last 2 rounds in a professional boxing ring, but that he could step onto an NFL field tomorrow with 0 training and catch a touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes.
Delusional but effective.
He even offered to send his private jet to fly contenders out to Puerto Rico.
It is asymmetrical arrogance. It's deliberately designed to pit America's most popular sport against its most visceral one.
Getting everyone talking.
Exactly. Paul understands that the NFL commands a cultural footprint that completely dwarfs boxing. By insulting the athletic validity of football players, he triggers a tribal response from a massive audience that normally wouldn't engage with his content at all.
But he actually got a response, and it didn't come from, a wide receiver looking for a quick payday. It came from Josh Hokett.
Right.
And for those who don't know, Hokett is a former undrafted San Francisco 49ers player who transitioned to MMA and is now an undefeated 10-0 heavyweight in the UFC.
With 3 bonuses, I believe.
Yes. Hokett responded with a quote, "Not only could I beat you in a boxing match, I'd beat you in any sport under the sun."
A very direct call-out.
And what did Paul do? He immediately dismissed Hokett as just trying to sell and chase clout.
Of course he did.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Hokett isn't just a random Twitter troll. He's a 10-0 UFC heavyweight. It's like Paul challenged the high school math club, and the star linebacker, who also happens to be an MIT physics prodigy, answered the call.
That's a great analogy.
Does Paul actually want that smoke? Or just the retweets? It exposes the reality that he is carefully curating his opposition.
He absolutely is curating it. A fight with a 10-0 UFC heavyweight carries immense physical risk for just a fraction of the mainstream reward, especially compared to fighting a retired, highly recognizable NBA or NFL star.
Right. The casual fan doesn't know Hokett.
Exactly. But if we strip away the promotion and look at the underlying sports science of Paul's initial claim that an elite NFL player would gas out in 2 rounds of boxing, there's a fascinating physiological debate to be had here.
Right, because on the surface, an NFL player is infinitely more athletic than a standard professional boxer.
On paper, yes.
If you look at their vertical leap, their 40-yard dash, their explosive power output, it's not even close.
It's not. But athleticism is highly task-specific. NFL players are optimized for the ATP-PC energy system.
The what?
The ATP-PC system. They are required to generate massive maximal kinetic force for 6 to 8 seconds at a time, followed by 30 to 40 seconds of complete rest.
Okay, the huddle.
Right. Their bodies are built on fast-twitch muscle fibers that require vast amounts of oxygen to recover. Boxing and MMA operate in a completely different metabolic universe.
Endurance over explosion.
Exactly. They require sustained, high-intensity aerobic and anaerobic output for 3 to 5 minutes consecutively, with only a 1-minute rest in between.
That's a massive difference.
If you put a 250-pound NFL linebacker in a boxing ring and force him to throw punches for 90 seconds, his peripheral nervous system will literally flood with lactic acid. His shoulders will fill with lead, and his explosive fast-twitch fibers will completely redline.
And that's just the cardiovascular tax. That doesn't even account for the neurological shock of actually getting punched in the face.
Exactly. The neuroplasticity of a combat athlete is totally different. An NFL player is conditioned to deliver and absorb impact using their body as a projectile, heavily armored in pads and a helmet.
Right, they brace for the hit.
Yes, their central nervous system braces for impact. But a boxer is conditioned to see a punch coming in their peripheral vision, relax their neck muscles to roll with the kinetic force, and maintain absolute cognitive composure while their brain is literally rattling against their skull.
Which is insane when you think about it.
It is. The specialized neurological conditioning required to not panic, to not trigger that fight-or-flight response when you are trapped in a corner and taking damage, is something you simply cannot build in an NFL weight room.
So Paul actually has a point.
Yeah, so while Paul's claim about catching a pass from Mahomes is completely delusional, his assessment of a football player's aerobic gas tank in a boxing ring is physiologically accurate.
It's the ultimate validation of combat sports as a nutritional science. You can't just muscle your way through a fight.
Not at the elite level.
And while Jake Paul is engineering these viral spectacles to build a billion-dollar brand, halfway across the world, There are fighters who are entirely rejecting the algorithm.
Chasing something else entirely.
Right. They are chasing a currency that a TikTok view count cannot quantify. Historical legacy.
The pursuit of legacy.
Yeah.
It is arguably the most demanding path a human being can take because it requires a level of sustained physical and psychological perfection that defies standard deviation.
And we're talking about the UFC pound-for-pound king here, Islam Makhachev. He is slated to defend his title against Ian Gary at UFC 330 in Philadelphia on August 15th.
Huge matchup.
But Islam is doing this at 170 pounds. He's moving up to the welterweight division. What stands out to me here isn't just the fight itself, but Islam's explicit rejection of the path laid out by his mentor, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound philosophical divergence within the most dominant camp in modern MMA history.
Yeah, let's look at Khabib. He retired at the absolute zenith of his career. He was 29-0, just 32 years old, the undisputed lightweight champion, and he simply walked away.
Left it all behind.
He retired because after his father and coach, Abdulmanap, passed away, Khabib made a promise to his mother that he would not fight without his father in his corner. It was a retirement rooted in deep traditional and familial duty.
Right.
But Islam, who grew up on the exact same mats in Dagestan, molded by the exact same coach, is taking a diametrically opposed route.
A completely different mindset.
He recently stated, "I am the best fighter in the world, but I want to be the best fighter to ever do this." He isn't just talking about defending a second belt against Ian Gary. He is explicitly targeting Anderson Silva's historic 16-fight UFC win streak.
Which is legendary.
Islam even said it's not going to be just 17 wins in a row, it's going to be many more.
The contrast there is striking. Khabib's motivation was ultimately rooted in obedience and honor, right?
Yeah.
Once the patriarch was gone, the competitive fire was basically extinguished by a higher moral obligation.
He conquered the sport and went home.
Exactly. Yeah. But Islam is operating on a frequency of statistical, individual immortality. He is looking squarely at the record books.
And those records are hard to beat.
Anderson Silva's 16-fight win streak spanned from 2006 to 2012. In the context of MMA, where there are just infinite variables, a single slip, a slightly mistimed level change, a cut over the eye, a blown ligament winning 16 consecutive times against the elite of the elite is a mathematical anomaly.
So what does this all mean? Islam isn't just trying to clear out a division. He's setting up camp at the top of the mountain and daring history to challenge him.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the difference between a conquering hero going home to his farm and an emperor deciding to rule the world forever. Can a fighter maintain the hunger when they've already won all the belts? How do you wake up at 5 a.m. to go endure the absolute torture of a Dagestani wrestling practice, just for a number on a Wikipedia page?
And that relentless conquest takes a massive biomechanical toll. Islam moving up to 170 pounds to face Ian Gary introduces entirely new physiological variables.
Right, the weight class change.
He has to carry an extra 15 pounds of functional muscle and water weight into the cage. That alters his oxidative capacity. His heart has to pump blood to a larger muscular frame, which drains his cardio much faster.
Plus, Gary is huge.
Right, he's facing a fighter in Gary who has a significantly longer reach, a higher center of gravity, and strikes from entirely different spatial angles than the 155-pounders Islam is used to fighting.
And he's doing all this while the global churn of contenders is just constantly bubbling up underneath him.
The sport never sleeps.
Just look at the recent results from the UFC Belgrade post-fight press conference. You had Uros Medic making incredibly quick work of Daniel Rodriguez.
The flawless performance.
And Navajo Sterling taking out Jan Blachowicz. The wolves are always at the door in this sport. Every year, a new crop of young killers enters the promotion with new techniques, better nutrition, and 0 miles on their odometers. That is what Islam is choosing to face, over and over again, to chase a ghost like Anderson Silva.
That is the price of immortality. You cannot just master the era you were born into. You have to evolve fast enough to master the era that comes after you.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Legacy, immortality, the biomechanical toll of greatness. But before we dive deeper into the raw, traditional roots that built this discipline, let's take a quick breather to hear from the sponsors that keep the show running.
Sounds good.
Before we dive deeper, shout out to our sponsors. First up, Elite Sports, leaders in premium fightwear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got gear built to move with you. Check them out at elitesports.com.
Awesome gear.
And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They are currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. And if you've got a story, news tip, or question... All right, we are back. We spent a lot of time today dissecting the bright lights, the viral marketing, the algorithmic matchmaking, and the million-dollar legacies.
The flashy side of the sport.
Right. But I want to strip all of that commercialism away for a minute and look at two events that bring martial arts back to its absolute raw foundation: discipline and duty.
This is a vital pivot because
Yeah.
it really contextualizes why these physical practices were developed in the first place, long before there were pay-per-view points or TikTok views to chase.
Exactly. On August 1st, at the Ohio Wushu Academy in Columbus, you have the USA International Martial Arts Championships and supplemental Kung Fu trials.
A fantastic event.
This isn't about a massive purse or a viral knockout. It's a premier competition dedicated to the mastery of traditional and contemporary Chinese martial arts wushu, tai chi, kung fu. And it actually includes the team trials to qualify athletes for the U.S. team at the One Old Kung Fu Championships.
It's all about precision and dedication.
These athletes are dedicating their lives to the absolute mastery of form, kinetic chaining, balance, and traditional weaponry, entirely outside of the mainstream spotlight.
It is the bedrock of martial discipline. The biomechanical control required for high-level wushu is extraordinary.
I can only imagine.
It requires a profound connection between the central nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. Every movement is deliberate, generating power from the ground through the hips and extending to the fingertips or the weapon.
Which translates to modern combat.
Oh, absolutely. It's the exact kinetic chaining that modern MMA fighters use to throw a knockout punch, but it's practiced here for the sake of absolute perfection rather than destruction.
But if you want to talk about taking that physical control and pushing it to an unimaginable extreme for the sake of duty, look at the footage coming out of Da Nang, Vietnam.
Unbelievable footage.
It's for the 2026 People's Public Security Sports, Martial Arts, and Military Games. Think about the last time you tried to do a heavy set of squats at the gym and you felt that deep lactic acid burn in your quads, that feeling where your body is just screaming at you to stop.
We've all been there.
Now imagine feeling that while pulling a specialized military vehicle that weighs tens of metric tons, using a harness attached to your body, and it's pouring rain, and you're doing it in front of thousands of people.
The scale of the Da Nang exhibition is just difficult to comprehend. We're talking over 2,000 public security officers participating in extreme physical feats.
In the heavy rain, no less.
Yeah. Nighttime military firearms, shooting with explosive effects, cavalry troops demonstrating shooting skills while riding horseback.
And the Qigong exhibitions. We are talking about Special Forces officers walking barefoot on blazing hot coals, breaking fire sticks over their own bodies.
It defies logic.
When I watched this, I realized this is the ultimate contrast to the Jake Paul era of martial arts. In MMA or crossover boxing, the pursuit is intensely individualistic. It's about personal legacy, wealth generation, and individual glory. The fighter is the product, and the suffering is for entertainment.
Right.
But these 2,000 Vietnamese officers are not performing for a Vicey TV contract. They are demonstrating the readiness, the discipline, and the physical superiority of the state apparatus. They are enduring extreme physical trauma to prove their readiness to protect society.
The psychological framing here is what's critical. The mechanism of suffering is identical.
Pain is pain.
Right? The human body experiencing the thermal conductivity of hot coals or the crushing physical load of a 10-ton truck feels the exact same nociceptive pain signals as a fighter taking a vicious leg kick. But the why alters how that pain is processed by the brain.
How does that work?
When you practice Qigong, you are actively utilizing the gate control theory of pain. By aligning breath, movement, and extreme mental focus, the brain modulates the descending pain pathways, essentially blocking the nociceptive signals from registering as agony.
Whoa.
When that pain is endured for collective duty rather than individual gain, it becomes a symbol of sacrifice. The psychological conditioning allows these officers to endure physical trauma that would instantly break an untrained individual.
It's fascinating. If you think about it, Pulling a 10-ton vehicle or walking barefoot on hot coals is the ultimate Trigon ring.
That's a profound way to look at it.
It's an environment designed to test your absolute limits. But instead of doing it for a viral moment, they're doing it to prove their readiness to protect society. It's a completely different why behind the what of human suffering.
Beautifully said. But whether you are walking on coals out of duty or fighting in a cage for legacy, there is one unavoidable truth. The human body has ultimate physical limits.
The armor eventually cracks.
Connective tissue snaps, bones break. Which brings us to a situation that has the entire sports medicine community scratching their heads.
You're talking about the fallout from UFC 329, right?
Yes, the structural integrity of Conor McGregor's knee.
The fight against Max Holloway was supposed to be the greatest comeback in sports history. The hype was unreal. Instead, seconds into the first round, McGregor plants his foot, his leg gives out, and the fight is over. Total disaster.
Heartbreaking for the fans.
But what happened next is where it gets highly suspicious. McGregor releases an update claiming it's a torn ACL and meniscus, the exact same injury he suffered against Holloway years ago, just on the opposite leg.
Right.
He sees advancements in regenerative medicine and promises to return to competition by next summer. That is less than a 9-month turnaround for a blown-out knee.
And that timeline, combined with the rehabilitation footage he is broadcasting to the world, completely contradicts standard orthopedic science.
When sports scientist Dr. Brian Sutterer broke down the tape of McGregor's gym videos less than a month post-injury, the red flags were everywhere.
Oh, they were glaring.
Conor is posting videos of himself cranking away on a rowing machine and doing heavy seated leg extensions. And in all of this high-definition footage, there is zero visible swelling around the knee. None.
Let's dive into the anatomy of why this is so alarming. The anterior cruciate ligament, the ACL, is the primary internal stabilizer of the knee joint.
Okay.
Its main job is to prevent the tibia, the shin bone, from sliding forward underneath the femur. When you suffer a full-thickness tear of the ACL, the joint loses structural integrity.
Right.
The knee capsule immediately fills with synovial fluid and blood. It swells massively. The exercises McGregor is doing are medically highly contraindicated for a fresh ACL tear.
The leg extensions.
Yes, a seated leg extension is what we call an open kinetic chain exercise. Because the foot is free-floating and the resistance is placed on the shin, firing the quadriceps creates immense anterior shear force. It literally pulls the tibia forward.
Oh.
If the ACL is torn, or if there is a fresh surgical graft, doing loaded open kinetic chain extensions places catastrophic stress directly on that fragile tissue. Standard protocol relies on closed kinetic chain exercises, like squats, where the foot is planted, engaging the hamstrings to protect the ACL.
So Dr. Sutterer's conclusion was blunt. Either McGregor is a superhuman genetic mutant, or this is extremely atypical for a run-of-the-mill full-thickness ACL tear. The timeline simply does not add up with the visual evidence.
Not at all.
But I want to look at this through the lens of Nikisa Badarian's financial playbook that we talked about earlier. Conor McGregor isn't just an athlete. He is a billion-dollar corporate entity.
Very true.
He has massive sponsorships, investors, and an entire brand built on the projection of invincibility. Conor is posting energy drink ads while doing seated leg extensions on a supposedly freshly torn ACL.
It's all about optics.
It's like watching a guy whose car engine just exploded, aggressively revving it in neutral to prove to everyone it's fine. Are we witnessing medical miracles or just smoke and mirrors? Because the second the investors and the fans realize the physical asset is genuinely broken, the crossover spectacle dies.
That is the immense, unseen pressure of modern combat sports. Fighters feel immense pressure to project invincibility even when severely compromised.
They can't show weakness.
No. They are trained to deny pain in the cage, but the financial architecture demands they deny vulnerability outside of it. Elite athletes do have access to stem cell treatments, PRP injections, and hyperbaric chambers that can optimize healing. It's also possible the tear was partial, not full thickness.
Right, we don't have his medical charts.
But the aggressive projection of normalcy is a desperate attempt to maintain narrative control. The danger is that if he actually attempts to fight in 9 months on a compromised knee, he risks suffering a career-ending catastrophic failure of the joint.
And while fans and doctors obsess over torn ACLs and physical swelling things we can actually see, the most devastating injuries in combat sports are often entirely invisible.
This is the most difficult reality of the sport, and it's a systemic crisis that the industry is largely unequipped to handle.
We have to discuss the breaking news regarding former UFC title challenger Anthony Smith, and we will report the facts impartially here.
Of course.
Smith was arrested in Nebraska on 3 felony charges. attempted first-degree domestic assault, terroristic threats, and first-degree false imprisonment. He turned himself in and was released on a $500,000 bond.
A very serious situation.
His manager, Brian Butler, released a statement urging the public not to rush to judgment and asking for privacy. But most importantly, we have to look at the heartbreaking statement from Smith's wife, Makhachev.
Yes.
She affirms her love for him, calls him a good man and a great dad, and she explicitly states, "They made a mental health struggle into something it wasn't. I am safe and always was safe. He would never hurt me, ever. I called for help to protect him from himself."
This raises an important question about the severe stigma surrounding mental health in combat sports.
It really does.
Let's examine the neurological rewiring required to be a professional fighter. When a normal human being is locked in a cage with someone trying to render them unconscious, the amygdala triggers the fight-or-flight response.
Panic sets in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The parasympathetic nervous system screams at you to flee. To become a world-class fighter like Anthony Smith, you have to spend a decade systematically overriding your own survival instincts.
You have to run towards the danger.
You are actively trained to suppress pain, ignore fear, and push forward through severe trauma. You build a specialized psychological armor that allows you to survive in an environment of extreme violence.
But we cheer wildly when these guys turn on the killer instinct in the octagon. The crowd goes crazy, but society has virtually zero infrastructure to help them turn it off when they go home.
None. There is no off switch.
Is the very psychological armor that makes someone a world-class fighter also what makes them so incredibly vulnerable when the gloves come off?
It is the ultimate double-edged sword. Trauma conditioning creates hypervigilance. If a fighter is suffering from a mental health crisis, that specialized wiring can go into overdrive outside the cage.
They lose their normal release valves.
Yes. And analyze the tragedy of what happens when authorities are called. When a family member recognizes a severe crisis and calls for medical or psychiatric help to protect the fighter from themselves, the system fails.
Law enforcement isn't equipped for this.
They rarely differentiate between a severe mental health crisis and criminal intent in the heat of the moment.
Because when the police arrive, they don't see a patient suffering a medical emergency. They see a 205-pound professional cage fighter in distress, and they interpret it as a threat.
Precisely. Makhachev Smith's statement is a desperate plea for context. She is stating her husband is sick and needs help, and the system's response is to hand him 3 felonies. It highlights the profound lack of psychological decompression protocols for the athletes who sacrifice their brains for this industry.
It's a heavy, deeply sobering reality. We demand so much of these athletes, and we understand so incredibly little of what it actually costs them. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. Consider the journey of the modern martial artists that we've explored today.
It's quite the journey.
We expect them to bleed for our entertainment, trapped in triangle rings designed specifically to generate high-speed collisions for the algorithm. We expect them to heal like comic book characters in record time just to keep the corporate hype train moving.
And the venture capital flowing.
Exactly. And then, after demanding that they rewire their nervous systems to survive years of brutal combat, we expect them to effortlessly switch off their adrenaline, suppress their trauma, and act like completely normal members of society the exact second they return to their families.
Which is impossible.
Perhaps the true necessary evolution of combat sports isn't about finding a new mathematical geometry for a boxing ring. Perhaps it isn't about setting up a billion-dollar corporate merger or a new viral crossover.
It has to be deeper than that.
Perhaps the real evolution is finally recognizing and actively protecting the incredibly fragile humanity that exists underneath the fighter's armor. Think about that the next time you watch someone make the walk to the cage.
Absolutely.
That's it for this episode of Budocast. Thanks for joining us as we break down the latest in martial arts. We'll be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, train hard, stay humble.